So, welcome to the Spiritual Hour podcast. This is going to be a weekly podcast. I'm Grey Wolf Psychic Medium, and today we're going to be talking about spiritual awakenings. Now, I want to share with you my story around my awakening and some of the signs and symptoms that I was going through. But I also want to talk as well about signs what you may be going through. Now, I want to try and make this podcast as interactive as I possibly can. So I want you guys to also get involved, whether there's questions or feedback, anything like that, you can get in touch with me. So the email is thespiritualhour@gmail.com. Okay, so for myself, I'm a psychic medium. I am clairvoyant psychic medium. I'm medical intuitive. I'm also an animal communicator as well. So what does that mean? So for those of you that may not be sure what that means, I'm clairvoyant, which means I see images in my mind's eye. So when I work with spirit, or even when I'm doing psychic readings, I see images inside my mind's eye. So it's like watching a movie in my mind, and I get pictures or images that come through, which I have to quickly interpret what spirit's saying to me to pass on to you guys. Now, as I mentioned too, I'm also a medical intuitive, which means that also when I'm doing readings, I'm able to pick up medical issues for people. Now, bearing in mind, there is some things that I would never, ever say in a reading. Now, the way that works, I get drawn to different parts of the body. So, for instance, sometimes I'll get it like an X-ray, sometimes I'll get it like an MRI, sometimes I get put within inside the body and get shown a specific part or organ of the body. And that's the way that I work as a medical intuitive. I'm also an animal communicator. So, what does that mean? So for myself, when I get animals that are coming through my readings, which they do very, very often, I again will get images that come through. And I have to interpret the images of whatever animal it is that's showing me to pass on to the person I'm reading for, which we call the sitter. So, for instance, I might get certain images that the dog's showing me. I have to quickly interpret that image and give it to the person, and that is how I pass it on. As I always say to people, images are the universal language, and that is how I work as a psychic medium. Now, today, I wanted to talk about my spiritual awakening. Now, this started around 9 to 10 years ago, give or take. It started when I was actually in quite a dark place. So I was going through quite a lot of depression at the time. There's quite a lot of trauma I was going through. And I would probably say that I was at probably the lowest point in my life. Now, at this particular time, I was really struggling with my mind. I was getting a lot of flashbacks. So obviously I was suffering with CPTSD. So I was getting a lot of flashbacks. But some of these flashbacks was blending into images too of things or people or places I just didn't know or didn't understand, never met them, never been there. So over time, these images become stronger and stronger and stronger. And at the time, I didn't quite realise what was going on. I didn't have any psychic or medium friends. I had no idea. And then I started to realise that there was things that I was feeling, things that I was sensing, things that was coming into my mind, but I just didn't know why. Anyway, at this particular time, I would probably say that I was going through a bit of a breakdown. That's probably an understatement, but I was going through a breakdown at the time. So I was completely lost, probably at the lowest point that I'd ever been in my life. And I was someone that had been through social services as a child. So I was someone that was in foster care, I was in children's homes, things like that. And I, at the time, was going through a lot of my old social services records. And I was trying to piece together parts of my life that I just couldn't remember. And trying to understand in my mind where I'd been, who I'd been with, because I'd had several foster parents. So there were so many pieces of my journey in my head that was completely missing. And so I started to look through my social services records. As I started to go through them, again, I was filled with images in my mind, absolutely tons of them, image after image. I was filled with names. I was then filled with memories, flashbacks just coming back to me just out of the blue. And as I started to try and piece together my story, if you like, my past, my childhood, I was starting to get what I'd call the sixth sense and started to know things, but I just didn't know why I knew. And I started writing things down. And as I started to write things down, I started to realise that all the things that was coming into my head, all these names, places, situations, they all started to make sense. And as I was going through, because these files are sorted out in chronological order, and so as I started to go through these, I started to realise that the parts of my mind that I'd kind of put aside or blocked out because of traumas and things like that, all of a sudden these memories was flooding back as I'm holding the paper, as I'm holding these records. I spent a lot of time going through that, an absolute ton of time. And then I was starting to get physical symptoms on my body. So I started to really struggle with things like anxiety and panic attacks. And I remember at the time feeling like I just couldn't breathe at all. And I remember my partner came in and I said to her, I can't breathe. I was really struggling. She'd call the ambulance and I had a panic attack. Now, what you have to bear in mind at the time, as someone that's clairsentient, which means to feel, not only do we see as a clairvoyant, but we feel as a clairsentient. So a lot of the things that I was feeling was also the spirits around me and their energies around me. And I didn't realise this at the time, of course, but for instance, when you get somebody in spirit that's passed of a heart attack, they can make you feel that. And so you feel that with sometimes chest pains or tightening on the chest, or in some other ways you can feel it around the chest. Now, so I was starting to get all these things that was happening to me. I was starting to see orbs. I was seeing them all around me. And then one day, my partner said to me, I'm going to book a reading. And me being me at the time, I wasn't a psychic or medium at the time, bear in mind, or didn't know I was. I said to her, okay, let's do it. I'll see whatever comes through. And so my partner booked me a reading. It was my first ever reading. This person did it by email, so it wasn't by voice message or even video call. It was by email. And so I remember it was my turn, and they sent me the message through of what they'd connected with, and they told me that they'd brought my brother through. They told me how old my brother was when he passed. They told me how he passed. They told me a lot of other things. Now, at this particular time, my mind was blown, and I mean blown. There's no records of this available anywhere, not on my Facebooks, nowhere, just absolutely nowhere. There's absolutely no records of it anywhere. And at this point, I remember feeling literally just numb. Numb in a sense of, oh my goodness me, my brother really is there in spirit. And oh my God, there must really be these spirits around me, because there's no way on earth that they could give me this information, because it's not available anywhere. So anyway, after that, my life changed massively. In a way that I went from not sure whether there was, and used to joke about ghosts and spirits, to, oh my God, there most definitely is an afterlife. My brother's watching over me. I wonder who else is looking over me. And so I completely changed my perception on the afterlife and the way that it worked, I suppose. So carry on just a little bit more. And again, just trying to get through life and trying to understand things. I'm having all these different things that are happening to me as well, all these signs and symptoms. And I remember sitting there one day my missus had she'd done dinner for us, and she'd put the TV on, and I remember that she'd put on, I think it was Tyler Henry, his Medium show. I can't remember what it's called. So anyway, me being me, I was like, oh, I don't really want to watch this. Oh my God, So anyway, after kind of putting up a little bit of a fight, like I don't really want to watch this, like let's watch something else. After 5 minutes I'm watching it, absolutely amazed by what he's giving to people, amazed by the information that's coming through, amazed by the people's reactions, completely mind blown. By this time I'm completely bought into it, and within 30 minutes of watching the show, I'm saying, oh my goodness me, I wish I could do that. That would be amazing to be able to do that. About a week later, my wish came true in more ways than one. I remember that me and my partner were sitting in the garden, at the bottom of the garden, and there's quite a lot of bamboo trees at the bottom of the garden, and they're maybe around 8, 9, 10 foot tall, varied, but they're pretty tall anyway. So I'm sitting there, it's summertime, it's the afternoon, so blazing sunlight. I'm sitting down, and all of a sudden, my partner's kind of sitting there, I'm sitting here, so she's kind of got her back to where I'm looking. And I'm saying to her, oh my God, can you see that angel standing there right next to the bamboo tree? She's looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm saying it's right there. And she's turning around trying to see what I could see. And I'm telling her that it's as tall as the bamboo plants. And I could see the wings coming out at the side. I could see how tall it was. It was at least 8 to 10 foot, depending which plant it was up against. It was pretty tall. I'm going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She thinks I've lost the plot. Then, probably about 30 minutes later, again, give or take, I say to her, I don't feel right. Like, I'm not sure if I've sat in the sun for too long. I don't know. I don't feel right. I just need to go in for a minute. So I go inside. I think I'm just going to sit on the bed. So I go upstairs. I'm just going to sit on the bed. Next minute, I fell onto the bed. As I fell onto the bed, I got projected out of my body instantly. I always joke about calling it spiritual kidnapping, but it wasn't like that. And so as soon as I hit the bed, it was like I went into the deepest meditation you could possibly imagine, except for I wasn't trying, I wasn't breathing, I wasn't even trying to do that. I just laid down. I remember coming out of my body, going through a porthole in my bedroom, and then at that point we got taken through the astral realm. And I remember seeing all these different coloured bands of energies, like golds, greens, pinks, and seeing all these, and they're all like that, these bands of energies, as I could see it going through the astral realm. As I went a little bit further along, I could see a male and a female, and they both looked around 25 to 30 years old. As soon as I looked at them, I instantly recognised them. Instantly. I knew that it was my brother and my sister, both in spirit, both who had passed as children or babies. Now, the strange thing about that was, although they passed as babies, I seen them in their adult form. I felt their energy, I felt their love. I felt this such strong connection from them. But I was told I had to carry on. And so we continued going through the astral realm until we got to what I describe as a golden bridge. It was kind of like the Golden Gate Bridge, but it was completely golden. Everything on it was gold. We went across this bridge, again in the astral realm. When we got to the end of this bridge, there was a white Colosseum. It was all white marble. And I remember going through the doors, and as soon as you go through the doors, there was these big steps that went up. And there was a gentleman standing there with long white sort of hair to about here, and he had a long white sort of gown on, and holding like a staff stick. And I remember saying to him, "Who are you? What's your name?" And he said to me, "My name is Theseus, but you can call me Thomas." He then went on to tell me that I didn't realise how powerful I was. And he told me that I was a healer and I was going to heal many people in many ways. At this point, my mind's blown. I have no idea what he's trying to say to me because I didn't realise that I was a healer, a psychic, a medium. I had no idea. So we went on to also make like a deal between us. Because I was struggling so much with my mental health at the time, the deal was that they helped me and I would help other people. And that was the deal that we made. At this point, maybe it's 20 minutes later, it would be a rough guess, but maybe around 20 minutes later, my partner walks into the room and she says she walks in and I'm laying down on the bed and she's saying that I'm saying, "I can't get back to my body. I can't get back to my body." In the back of my head, I'm hearing Theseus say to me, "It's okay. Just take your time. Everything's going to be okay." Physically, I'm on the bed. Spiritually, I'm somewhere else. And he tells me just to relax. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to bring you back. And my partner's coming in and she's in a little bit of a panic at the time, she's telling me. I eventually come back. So I eventually come back to my body. And I'm sitting there on the bed and I'm literally shaking like this. And she's kind of like, "Oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm trying to explain to her what's just happened. But Theseus had told me to get some coffee and to get some chocolate to ground myself. So my partner goes downstairs, gets both of them, comes back up. I'm still feeling a little bit shaky, so I have the chocolate, I have the coffee. And eventually I start to come round, I start to try and put it into words to her. Pardon me. And I start to try and put it into words to her. And I start to try and explain to her what I've just gone through without sounding complete crackers. So, obviously, I'm trying to explain it to her. She still thinks I'm pretty mad at this particular point. And I keep saying to her, they tell me I'm a healer. They tell me I'm a healer. Like they said, I'm going to heal with my hands and my words. And I still don't really understand what that meant at the time. And then, after speaking to my partner over the next few days, she recommends to me that I should go to a spiritual church and just connect with like-minded people just to see what the hell's going on with me, to see if there is anything there. So then I do decide to find a local spiritual church and I go in there. And at the time, the very first time I went in, I think, they told me to sit in the circle with them and to meditate with them. And when you finish meditating, just stand up and say whatever it is that you see. Okay, fair enough, I can do that. So when we finished the meditation, it was my turn, and they said to me, "Carl, what did you see?" So I explained that I could see this gentleman, I described this gentleman, I described the front of the house, I described this garden, and everything I'm saying, the gentleman opposite me in the circle at the spiritual church says to me, "That's my granddad. Everything you're saying, it's my granddad. That's his house, that's his garden, that's what he looked like." And at that particular point, I realised that all the things I'd been seeing in my head for all these years were spirit, but I just didn't know. And because I could see but not hear, I thought it was just my imagination. But it turns out that what I'd been seeing for many, many years was spirit. And so they always taught me at the spiritual church to say whatever it is that you see. Which I used to go to classes regular down there. And I used to do 3-4 classes every single week down there. And I did develop very, very quickly as a psychic and a medium, understanding how to connect with spirit, and started learning how to interpret what I'm getting from them, etc., etc. And so going through this particular awakening process was a little bit crazy. And I remember I coming back to the house. I think that was the Friday I went to the spiritual church. And on the Saturday, I remember coming back, being at home, and all of a sudden I started getting these images in my head. And I remember saying to my partner, I've got a message for you. Because I thought, I'm just going to say whatever they said to me at the spiritual church, I'm just going to follow that. So we did. And I started getting these images come through. And I remember saying to my partner, I've got your nan coming through. And I gave her all these messages and information that was coming through to now. Bear in mind, I'd never met a nana. Ever. Never knew about any of the things that I was being told by spirit. And I started passing these memories and messages and information from her nan through to her. And I remember at the time my jaw was just falling, just like, how did you know this? And I think at that time I really needed to do that, because I think even she thought I was losing the plot. And so after going to the spiritual church, then kind of coming back, and then the very next day thought, well, I'll just practice a reading, And I think by her getting that little message that she got from her helped her to understand that I was definitely connecting and working with spirit. And I think I needed someone to understand what I was going through and to believe what I was going through. At that particular time, I remember I'd go through in my garden, I'd look outside and there'd probably be 15, 20 animals in my garden that I could see, at least. And I could see, there was one particular spot at the bottom of the garden where I could see a black collie dog, and I was being shown that the dog was buried underneath my shed, which was really bizarre. And so my next door neighbour used to live where I live, and they still live next door. And so I asked my next door neighbour, do you know if there was ever a dog that was buried underneath the shed, basically? And I remember them saying to me, yes, there was. And so this helped me to understand too that not only was I able to connect with humans, but I was able to connect with animals too. And so I was getting animals that were starting coming through. And so whether there was cats, dogs, birds, and where I live, there used to be farms in this area, and so I was also getting cows and sheep and all kinds of things. And so it helped me to understand that the next part of my spiritual journey was understanding that it's not just humans that go to spirit, but also animals that go to spirit too. And so I realised that my house was very, very busy with spirits all the time. I used to find that my living room in particular was really, really spiritual active, and not in a negative way, but I never used to like being in the room. I used to find it a little bit too busy for me, and I used to find it a little bit overwhelming. I remember seeing images in my head of the living room of what it used to look like. Excuse me. And again, passing these images on to my partner, because she moved into the house before I did. And she's telling me, yes, it used to look exactly like that. And so then I started to realise that not only was I connecting with humans in spirit, animals in spirit, but I was also getting images of what the house used to look like in the past. I also had another situation too, where one day, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I remember standing in my living room, and all of a sudden again, I seen another angel. I could see it above me, so it was in the living room. And all of a sudden, I started shaking like this, and my missus, well, she got a little bit scared, if I'm honest. And I said to her, I don't know what's going on. And so again, later I went back to spiritual church. I could feel my body, but I was kind of resisting. And I went back to the spiritual church and spoke to them there because it was quite early on in my journey. And I remember them saying to me, again, they're trying to get you into a trance. So they want to do trance mediumship, but I was resisting. So my body, my aura was resisting. I was not allowing them to step in. And so this is why I was shaking like this at the time. And it was not something that I ever really wanted to. I didn't ever want to really be a trance medium. So at that particular time, when Mrs. is dead scared, she decides that I'm sleeping upstairs. She's sleeping downstairs. She's not staying next to me. She found it quite overwhelming at the time. Now, I also had other things happening to me. So there's an area where I used to walk every single day in my city. So I'd be walking across the park. And as I was walking across the park, I used to keep getting these deja vu moments. Now, bear in mind what I said at the beginning of the podcast, and I told you I was going through my social services records. So I was walking through the park, and I kept getting this like feelings and images of I've been here before. Now I thought, I've only lived here as an adult. Why do I keep getting this as a child? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But I kept getting images of me playing on this park, meeting family on this park. But these was when I was like 3 or 4. And it kept happening again and again. And I kept getting all these deja vu moments. Well then, after doing a lot more research through my files, I started to realise that the children's home that I lived in when I was 2, 3, 4 was actually in the area that I live now. And I just didn't know because I was too young. I just didn't know. And the park that I would walk across was the park that you'd go to from the children's home. So when they took you out to a park, that was the park that they took you to. It was also a park where I'd meet up with my mum. So she'd take me there from the children's home and she'd take me to the park. And then there was these other moments that I was having where, again, I was walking through the park and I got shown it in a sort of right diagonal angle. And I was being told that my nan used to live over there. Now, bear in mind, I'd never met my nan. My nan died 1 year before I was born. And I was being shown the exact direction towards this church. So again, I started digging more, and bearing in mind there's hundreds of pages in my records, and I mean hundreds. So I'm digging through all the information, and I eventually found some paperwork that relates to me again and to my family, and found out that exactly where I was pinpointed, where my nan used to live, was exactly where she lived. I got shown the church, and she lived opposite the church, which I was just mind blown, like completely mind blown. So I started to realise these moments of deja vu was happening quite a lot, and I was probably something that I should listen to, because most of the time these moments that I was having was actually true. And it was like memories that was just coming back to me as my soul started to awaken. I had all these heightened senses. Not only was I able to see, I was able to feel. One of my other ones is I can smell, I can taste, and I do hear a little, but that's probably my weakest one. So I was getting all these senses just on red alert, and me having to understand all these signs, what I was being shown of what Spirit's trying to tell me is the message and trying to help me to heal. Now, with this all in mind, with all these signs and the symptoms that I'm going through, bearing in mind at the point I'm on so many meds at the time as well. So I was really struggling in my mind. But then Spirit started to give me ways of looking at things differently. And so almost like trying to change my perception. So the way that I thought this situation was, it wasn't actually the way that I thought. So some of the traumas that I'd had, which was abandonment or rejection, it wasn't the way that I actually thought it was. And they helped me to understand and to change the way that I was looking at the situation. So I like to think of it as they gave me the tools to help me to find my way through this dark place. Now, another one of the things that was happening again was when my partner was pregnant with my son, and again, I didn't know I was a medium at the time. I remember a date, I can't remember the date that he was meant to be here, but I remember telling her that it's not going to come the date that she thought it was. It just wasn't going to be that date. And I kept telling her, it's going to be the 25th of January. And everyone's looking at me like, why do you think it's the 25th of January? I said, I'm just telling you it's the 25th of January. I kept saying to her that when it happens, it was going to happen really quickly. And I was always worried that something might happen when I wasn't there, because I felt like it was going to be a really quick birth. Anyway, I remember 6 months into the pregnancy, again, people are asking me the same question. Do you still think it's the 25th of January? I'm like, yep. Then the night before, so the 24th of January, so the night before, I remember standing in the doorway of the living room, and my partner's laying on the sofa. And obviously she's quite big at the time, of course. And I remember watching an orb fly through the room and fly straight into her stomach. And I mean straight into her stomach. I'm at the doorway going, oh my God, did you just see that? Did you just see that? Because she was laying down, she wasn't able to see what I could see. But the way I could see it was almost like it was confirmation for me that he was definitely coming the next day. That's how I took the sign. I seen the orb go straight to her stomach and just disappeared into her stomach, almost like a soul, if you like. Anyway, the next day came, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and her waters broke pretty quickly. And within 20 minutes of the water breaking, baby was here. And he was here very, very quickly. So I was right about not only him being born on the 25th, but also about him also being delivered very, very quickly. So again, these are some more of the signs and messages that I was receiving going through my spiritual awakening too. Now, there was something else that went on there, because after he was born, I remember holding him in my arms. And as I'm holding him, I just got this message that came to me. He's got autism. He's got autism. And I remember just repeating this message to the missus. And at that particular point, obviously he wasn't able to talk anyway, obviously only being 6 months old. But it was something that we kind of bared in mind. Now, my partner had already had one child with autism already. So obviously it was something that we bared in mind, talked to obviously, I think, the nurses that come round. And I think by the time he was 4, we'd managed to get him a diagnosis, because we had this feeling so early on that he'd had diagnosis, this message that came to me. Again, this helped us to get the diagnosis much quicker. And I remember as well that we was thinking at the time, which nursery was we to send him to? And I remember my partner at this particular time, she got like a vision in her mind of one of the preschools in the area. But it wasn't the one that she was kind of had an idea of. All of a sudden she got this other one in her head. And she knew that, again, this was given to her by Spirit. And we later took him to that preschool, which turned out to be the best one for him, because it was really, really helpful with his autism, and he got like a one-to-one worker and all that sort of stuff. So it was really, really helpful. Some of the signs that we were receiving through the spiritual awakening. Now, for some of you guys, you may also be going through signs of spiritual awakening yourself. You may have things like seeing images in your mind when you close your eyes at night. And as you close your eyes at night, you just see these faces, and you might see one after another. You might start to see places. Sometimes the images may be clear. Sometimes they may be a little black and white. Sometimes they may be in what I call high definition, dependent. But again, this could be spirit communication. This could be spirits that are trying to come through to you to try and pass messages on. And for some of you, just like me, you may not have heard a single word, but just see faces. But as I was taught, it was to say whatever it is that you see. And so one way of understanding this is just like when you're talking to somebody, whether it's at home or at work, it's a two-way conversation. And so in your mind, you're saying to spirit a certain thing. So for example, who are you? What is your name? What message do you have for me? So you start with one. So you'd ask one particular thing, and then they'll give you an image that comes next. So the images that are coming may relate to what you've just asked. It helps it easier to understand what they're saying to you, because if you're just trying to understand it, it's like catchphrase, say what you see. And sometimes that can be easy, but sometimes it can be difficult. And so that's why if you ask a question, then whatever images you get shown next may relate to the question that you've asked. Sometimes you might get a name. Sometimes you might have to see a message to understand what the message is, because some of you will hear. The other thing that you need to know is that when I say hear, I don't mean how you hear me. I mean like hearing inside your head. So almost like you're talking to your higher self. When you're arguing with yourself in your mind, sometimes that can come in a different voice or a different accent, and sometimes it can come in your own voice. So clairaudience is not necessarily how you hear me, although some mediums hear it like that. A lot of them hear it inside their head. So that's something to bear in mind. One of the other signs that you may be going through is you might have this high-pitched noise in your ear, like a frequencer, if you like. Now, bearing in mind there's no medical issues like tinnitus or high cortisol, there's another reason. As long as you've got no medical issues, what you could be experiencing there, again, is part of the spiritual awakening. So that sound, to me, is the sound of an energy present. So whether that's a spirit guide, whether that's an ancestor, whether that's somebody in spirit that wants to come through, that sound, that high vibrational sound, is the sound of that energy around you. So when you hear that sound in your ears, and there's no medical condition, ask yourself, who is my communicator? If you do see in your mind, check it out. Check out in your mind who you might see or who comes to mind first. So there's another one of the signs that you may be going through. You may also feel too that you've always been someone that's always felt so much. You may call yourself an empath, and you may feel so many emotions from other people around you. But ask yourself, are you just feeling the emotions from people around you, or are you also feeling things from spirit as well? And so, as I always call it, you've got clairsentience, so to feel. And so when they come through, they can make us experience things in our body, what they want us to say. And so what you need to ask yourself is, when you're feeling these signs and symptoms, is it you? Is it something you're thinking about? If you're not thinking about anything and it just comes in, then ask yourself, is this spirit? Now, there's also other instances. So you could be in a room and there could be somebody living in the room, and you can feel their anxiety, or you can feel like there's going to be an argument before it even happens. You can feel that real difficult energy in the air. You can really feel it. And so you can feel what that also feels like. Here's another one. Let's just say that you've got a problem in your life right now. A person, a situation, somebody that's living, okay? If you just take a moment right now to visualize this person, this situation, and just visualize it in your mind just for a moment and just focus on it. As you start to focus on that particular person, situation, all of a sudden, right now, you've just linked with that energy. You might feel an anxious feeling in your chest. You might feel like butterflies in your stomach. You might feel excitement, depending on what the energy is. And so whatever it is that you're thinking about that connects with them, whether there's been conflict between you, whether there's been uncertainty between you, whether there's them being anxious or upset or angry in any way, you may be connecting to that on a psychic level. So you need to ask yourself, when you're thinking about someone, are you tuning into them on a psychic level? So not as a medium, but as a psychic. And you may be tuning into their energy, stepping into their energy and connecting with their energy. And this is why you might be feeling so overwhelmed. And so ask yourself, when you feel like that and you notice that the energy that you feel makes you feel a little bit off, ask yourself that what you're thinking about, is it helpful to you? If the answer is no, then what I want you to do instead is to focus on a positive memory or person or situation. Okay, so it could be something from the past, it could be anything. It could be a wedding, could be a connection to one of your family, whatever it is. Again, just visualize it. Just take yourself back and visualize it. And as you start to visualize this person, this situation, or this memory, you'll notice that the energy starts to change. And as the energy starts to change, you'll notice that the feeling that you get feels warmer. It feels better. It may feel more loving. It may feel happier. And what this is also telling you here is what you're focusing on is how you're going to feel. And so it will also help you understand that if you're focusing on a lot of uncertainty or negativity or conflict in some way, maybe this is why you're feeling these energies. So just a little trick to help you step out of that is to focus on someone or something that makes you feel better, a memory of some sort. Again, for some more signs that you may be going through a spiritual awakening, you might be seeing a lot of angel numbers. So things like 111, 333, 1111, 222. So mirror numbers or any angel numbers. Now, these numbers all carry certain frequencies and energies and messages in some way. And you may find that you're waking up at 3:33 a.m., 2:22 a.m. And again, you may be going through spiritual awakening here by getting some of these signs. Now, you can find out the meanings of them by just simply going on to Google, whatever the number is, type in the spiritual, angel number meaning 222, or whatever your number is, and it will help you to understand whatever number it is, what message that you need to understand right now. So again, these are some more of the signs and symptoms that you may be going through that. Some of you may be going through something that's called the dark soul of the night. Now, this is deep. This is often a very, very difficult period. So often when there's been some form of trauma in some way, Trauma comes in many ways, remember, and there's been some form of trauma, and the only way to heal is to awaken the soul. It may come in the forms of flashbacks to a loss of identity, feeling no enjoyment in things, feeling isolation, etc., depression. There may be a lot of those signs that you could also be going through. Now, for me, that was really hard, but I'm going to do a show about that later on in one of the other podcasts about the dark soul of the night specifically, because it's something that a lot of people that go through it, but they don't understand the aspects of it and how hard it is to break through that. But you could also be going through that too. You may also be finding white feathers, or any types of feathers, but white's always my favourite. You may be finding white feathers in random places, so not next to your pillows or your quilts, but in random places. You could open your front door and one floats down in front of you. You could find one on the kitchen floor, for example. You could get into your car and there could be one on your car seat. And just finding these feathers in random places. And I always like to think of these gifts from the heaven. So it's their way of saying, I'm here, I'm with you, and here's my little calling card. So I always like to think of them like that. For me personally, I put them in a little box. I save them in a little box. So I do love having some of those signs from spirit that are around me. A robin for me too is another sign, and depending on what part of the world you live in, it could also be a cardinal. So I know that across in parts of US, instead of they having a robin, I know they have a cardinal. I'm not sure what part of the world that you guys may be from listening to this show, but again, a cardinal, a robin could also be a sign that one of your loved ones are watching over you. And sometimes that's one of my favourite personal signs, what I was going through as well. Now, for some of you guys, you may have so much information from today of the signs and symptoms of what you have gone through, what you're going through. But I really want you guys to become part of this show and to also share little stories or ask questions on the weekly podcast. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads and YouTube. Grey Wolf Psychic Medium on all of those platforms, so you can find me on there. I also do private one-to-one readings as well. So for those of you that may be interested, I do private one-to-one readings, and I do it by video call. So it makes no difference where you are in the world. I can still connect with you as long as you've got the internet. So I also do that for those of you that are curious. Yes, you can contact me through any of those social media platforms for any inquiries. But I really would like you guys to get involved. So I'm going to give you the email again. To get in contact with the podcast, thespiritualhour@gmail.com. So if you've got any questions, any feedback that you'd like to give, anything that you'd love to hear a show on, I want you guys to get in touch. I want you guys to get in touch and let me know what you'd like to hear about. For me, I'm interested in sharing as much as I can about my spiritual insights and stories, or even my psychic gifts and spiritual gifts, and I really want to get people involved in the show. I always like to call myself the lone wolf because I very much have been the lone wolf for so long in my life, but I have built up some lovely followings through my social medias along the way, and built some lovely connections with my followers, which we call our spiritual family now. And I do like weekly Zooms as well. So for my subscribers through TikTok and Facebook, I do like a weekly Zoom for those as well. So we really, really connect in that way. And I'd like you guys as well to get in touch, whether you're listening to this right now on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. I'm not sure what other platforms we're going to post it to, but let me know as well which platform that you heard the Spiritual Hour on. I'm really, really keen to connect with as many like-minded people as I possibly can. One thing I'd also like to mention as well. Now, when we're going through a spiritual awakening, there's other things that can sometimes happen. So I've often noticed through my spiritual journey that a lot of souls, when they've lost someone very close, could be a mum, could be a dad, could be anybody else in the family, but when they've lost someone very close, a lot of people go through a spiritual awakening then too. And I'll give you an example. So after we've lost them, we often, I lost my dad recently, so we often say, I want to hear you one more time. I want to see you one more time. I want to feel you one more time. Are you around me? Give me a sign. So basically, at that particular point, you're kind of sending a message out to spirit, like a telephone call in a way. You're sending a message out to spirit and you're saying to them, please show me that you're there. I'm prepared for you to step forward and show me a sign that you're with me. And at that particular point, we may have things like visitation dreams. So you may have lost someone, and on that evening or a week later, a month later, a year later, you may have what's called a visitation dream. And a visitation dream is when one of your loved ones in spirit comes to visit you in your sleep. And sometimes they will tell you things. Sometimes they'll just watch over you and say, I seen them, but they didn't say anything. But sometimes the message is, I'm with you, and that's what the message is. Sometimes they've got more to say to you. Sometimes it could be sorrow. Sometimes it's, I love you. Sometimes they could be letting you know something that's upcoming. So visitation dream as well is another one of the signs that you're going through a spiritual awakening for sure. And when we lose someone, because effectively we change our perception of, I wonder if there's somebody there. I really want them to be someone there. I'm prepared to see them, to feel them, to hear them. And some of you may feel that your bed's gone down. So you may be sitting on your bed or laying on your bed, and all of a sudden you feel like your bed's gone down. Some of you too may feel like you've got like a tickle on your head just there, almost like a little tickle. And this is another sign when they're around us too, when they're sending us healing, almost like when you've got a spider in your hair. It's another way of saying it. For me personally, I felt spirit physically touch me like this. And this was when I was at the spiritual church. And I remember we were sitting in a meditation, and all of a sudden I could see this little girl in my head, and she was running round the circle, and all of us were sitting down. There was like 20 of us in the circle. We was all sitting down, and all of a sudden I felt this on my face, and in my head I'm thinking, oh my goodness me. It felt just like, any normal person touching you. It didn't feel cold. It just felt normal. There was a touch on my face just like that. The strangest feeling, but I didn't open my eyes. I'm not opening my eyes. But I felt the little girl around me. So physically, yes, they can touch you physically. So some of you may feel them touch your hand, may touch your face, etc., etc. So again, when we're going through some form of trauma, particularly grieving, again, this is often when we're saying to spirit, I want you to communicate with me. I want you to show me that you're here. I want you to give me just one sign that you're watching over me. And one thing I know too is sometimes you will talk to your loved ones on the other side, and you may be just talking in your bedroom. You may be talking to your photos of your loved ones. You may be feeling their presence and feeling that cold shiver. And you're kind of thinking about them, and all of a sudden you feel the cold shiver, and you think, whoo, and that change in temperature is when that spirit's around you. So we talk about the goose pimples with chicken skin. And again, that change in temperature is another sign that they're around you. So particularly if you're talking to them or you're thinking of them, they also may be trying to give you a sign. I'm here. I'm right here. So these are some more of the signs that you may be going through spiritual awakening. And another way you can get it too is that you get songs. So songs that remind you of your loved one. It might have been something that was their favourite. It might have been something that they played or that was played at their funeral. And all of a sudden, this song just comes on and just reminds you of them. And it might be a little sign that makes you think about them, lets you know that they're around you at this particular time. You see, I believe in synchronicities, for certain things to line up all at once to make this one particular thing happen. And I remember after my mum passed, she passed 2 years ago. And I remember after she passed, I said to her, I want this sign from you, Mum, within 1 week. Firstly, I want a white feather, but I also want to see the robin within 1 week. Within 1 week, so I know it's from you, Mum. Now, she came through. I could see her clearly. She told me she was with her mum, she was with her dad, and she was also with my brother. And she showed me walking through this door. And as she walked through this door, I could see all the colours of the rainbow as she walked through this door. Now, about 3-4 days later, I was sitting in this exact room, but my chair was the opposite side. And I was sitting there and I looked up, and at the moment I looked up, bear in mind I'm normally doing private readings in here, so my head's down. I looked up and all of a sudden I could see this white feather just floating down right in front of me at the window. I went out, I grabbed the feather. I never walked to school, but this particular day I decided to walk to school. Never walk to school, always drive. So I walked to school, and as I maybe got 200-300 yards away from my house, I'm just walking, and out of the sky, a feather just flies down right in front of my path and drops into my hand. I didn't have to bend, I didn't have to stretch, I didn't have to run. It went straight into my hand. Now, for me to be there that specific time, again, synchronicities. Then I think it was a day or two later, so again, still within the same week. Again, I'm sitting in my room, don't often look out because I'm usually doing private readings. But all of a sudden, I spot the robin sitting on the fence. And I remember that feeling of, oh my God, there's my sign. That's my mum. And she let me know that she was around me. So signs can come in so many different ways. And, you know, I talk about synchronicities, things lining up for it to happen that specific day, that specific time, etc., etc. But for me, I understand how the universe works. I hope that all of you enjoyed the first show today, The Spiritual Awakening. And I hope you'll all be back next week as well for the next show. So keep an eye out for that. Next week, I'm going to be talking about trauma and how trauma affects us as psychics and mediums. So make sure you tune in for that. So guys, thank you all so much for listening. I'm Grey Wolf Psychic Medium on the Spiritual Hour, and I'll see you all again next week. Take care until then.